So what we want to do now is let's get our clown on the screen. Okay? So in order to get the clown on the screen, we need a texture. A texture starts with a capital T, is a graphic file. And we have just generic texture. Notice it's part of framework.graphics.texture. And you can make a two-dimensional texture, so like you'd use like a bitmap, GMP, PNG, whatever. That would be a texture 2D. If you're doing 3D games, you can have a texture 3D. We're just doing 2D games because that'll be enough work for now anyway. So texture 2D is the type of it's the data type that it is. It's a specialized data type. And then we're going to put clown texture. Okay? Clown texture. And so this is just, it's reserving place for us to create our texture of a clown. And this is in the class. So on the tutorial that you have available, it says in game 1 class. That's right here after you see public class game 1. Right there. Okay? Now, the next thing it's going to ask you to do is to load the actual texture. That's in the load content method. So we got to scroll down a little bit. Now, at this point, it's going to be handy for you to have line numbers. So if you're interested in getting line numbers in Visual Studio and you don't have it, you want to go to Edit. Where is it? Hold on. Let me find it first. Pretty sure it's under Tools, actually. We go to Tools, Options, and we want to look for the editor. Okay, Text Editor. I don't see anything about line numbers here, so we're going to expand that out. And we want to go to General. Oh, all languages. There we go. If you want to wrap your text, click Word Wrap. There should be line numbers. You want to check that. So it's your choice if you want to wrap the text or not. I'm going to set it now, and then I might change my mind later. I click OK. So now I got my line numbers. So now, just so you know, at the beginning of your project, the load content should be lines 46 or 45. And you're going to see a bunch of these to-do. So it's your to-do list, and this is kind of your hint here as to where you're going to do it. So you're going to use this .content to load your game content here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the variable, which is clown texture. Now, take a look at Microsoft Visual Studio. It uses a thing called IntelliSense. And basically, if you start to type something out, it looks for any possible correct code that would have those letters in it. So it immediately sees the following 4 items. Well, clown texture is what we're referring to. If you see it's highlighted, you can just hit Enter, and it completes it for you. Clown texture, and hold on a second. Let me check the tutorial, just make sure I get this right. Clown texture equals content.load. There we go. Couldn't remember that. Clown texture equals content with a capital C. And so you notice, the more you type out, it's content dot, and it's load. And then inside of these lesser than, greater than signs, you're going to put texture 2D. Because we need to tell it what kind of content are we loading. And then we're going to use parentheses and single quotes to write the name of the texture we're loading, and that's clown. It's a bitmap file, but we don't need to specify what file type it is. We just write the name of it, clown. Now, you're going to freak out when you see this red underline. You're like, crud, it's yelling at me. But really, it's going to do that until you put the semicolon, and once you do, it'll be happy. Or maybe not. Does it not like my single quote? Of course. Didn't I have the same problem the other day? Yeah, we did. Okay, sorry. Single quotes must be another programming language. Double quotes, now it's happy. However, all I had to do was highlight it, and it said something about string, whatever. Okay, so now we've loaded the content. And by the way, clown texture 2D is the same as a sprite in GameMaker. All right, now we have our texture. However, we don't have anything to put the texture on, and we need to actually place it on the screen. We need an object. And in XNA, our object is in the form of a rectangle. And it may not make sense to you right now, but if you think about it, every 2D graphic is a rectangle. It has a width and it has a height. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a new data type called rectangle, space, and instead of clown texture, let's write clown, and I like to capitalize the next word, R-E-C-T, clown rect, shorthand for clown rectangle. Okay? So notice these have to be different. They have to have different names because the texture 2D is one object and the rectangle is another. So what we're going to do is we need to tie the rectangle to the texture. But before we do, we're going to initialize the rectangle. So to initialize a rectangle, guess what method we're going to go to? Initialize. Thank you. You guys are so brilliant. And right here it says to do, add your initialization logic here. So clown rect equals, I'm guessing it's new rectangle. And now what we're going to do is we're going to give it a position on the screen. So we're going to say we're going to have it give it, now notice it says int x, int y, that's our x and y location. So we're going to move it 200 pixels to the right, 200 pixels down. And then we're going to set the width. Now the graphic was 32 by 32. If your graphic had a different size, you would give it a different width and height. The first one is always width. The second one is height. Okay? We always go x, then y. Okay? So it's x position 200, y position of 200. Width of 32, height of 32. Okay? So at this point, what we need to do is we're going to need to now draw the rectangle with the texture on top of it. And then we're going to determine whether it's see-through or not, or if we're going to tint it a certain color. Okay, so I'm going to pause here so you can get caught up. Okay, at this point, it's time to draw our graphic on the screen and test it out. So go to the draw method. Okay, now in the draw method, you're going to put, let's see, hold on a second. So on here, we're going to create a sprite batch. Sprite batch dot draw. Wait, is it draw or is it begin draw? Moment. Oh, begin, duh. Okay. And does it have to be capital S? I think it has to be capital S. Let me double check. No, little case. Okay, that's fine. All right. Sprite batch dot begin. Sprite batch dot draw. And sprite batch dot end. Okay. So what in the world is this sprite batch anyway? What is this new devilry we call sprite batch? A sprite batch is a batch of sprites. You ever get a batch of cookies? You make a batch of cookies, and you might make 12 cookies, 18, whatever. You pull them out of the oven. That's a batch. A batch is just a group, right? So a sprite batch is not as delicious as a sprite of cookies or a batch of cookies, but it's essential for your game. So the interesting thing what's going to happen here is, let me just comment this out for a moment, because it's giving me an error, and I don't like looking at the red underline. It makes me nervous. What you're going to do is, in the draw method, you have that sprite batch.begin. Then you're going to have sprite batch.end at the end. In the middle, for every single image you want to display on the screen, you're going to have to draw that image. So you're going to have a bunch of sprite batch.draws when we're done. One for every graphic that we have. So let's walk you through the sprite batch draw method. Sprite batch.draw, parenthesis. Now, as soon as I open my parenthesis, it gives me a hint. I can give it a 2D texture, a rectangle, which is the destination rectangle, and a color. Now, let me refer to what each of these are. First of all, the texture is going to be the clown texture. Okay? Then we're going to put a comma, and the destination rectangle, this is the rectangle that we're going to put our clown image on. So that's clown rec. Now the last one is color. Now look at what it says here. This allows you to add a tint to your sprite. So if you want to make your clown slightly reddish because he's angry, you might use color.red. If you want it to just have no tint at all, you use color.white. So for those of you who don't ever read anything, that's what it said. Don't do wheat. You'll have unintended consequences. And there you go. At this point in your code, you are ready to test out the first version of your game, and it's so exciting. You'll not believe how exciting this is. Click on the green Start Debugging, or just type F5 and wait while the magic begins. Wow, look at that. Look at that. If everything went correctly, look at this. Amazing. You're going to see shoot the clown, and there's your clown. Look at that. Isn't that kind of freaky for all of you that were afraid of clowns? And then you can minimize and close. You didn't know you could do that, did you? If this happens, you followed my tutorial correctly. Now, in just a moment, I'll answer questions that you have. And then I just want to tell you, if you've got the tutorial here, at this point, it tells you what to do. And it says like in initialize, in the class, in initialize. Just know the only thing we haven't done is, so when we draw other things here, I do want to point out, be careful the order in which you draw them. Because the first thing you draw is on the bottom. The second thing you draw is above it. The third thing you draw is above it. So just imagine what happens when you draw the background on top of your crosshair and on top of your clown. Once we get a little further and we do movement, the key here is you got to make sure you're in update. So you're going to have to add some of this stuff to update. And we'll go over that in the next tutorial.